I'm going to be using the following materials and tools to create this romper. I'm going to be working with this yellow and blue print fabric, which is available on the fabric shop. I used about 2.5 meters for it. I also have my scissors, some black buttons, my interfacing, which I'll be using to fuse the collar as well as the placket, and I have a separate video for the pattern for this romper. So if you haven't seen it already, please check the description for the link. So I'm going to go in and pin down my patterns along the grain line and cut out my pieces. I'm just going in here to cut out my collar stand, which I need 2 pieces for. No, one for the front and one for the back. I'm also cutting out my back piece, which I've cut along a fold because I just want 1 piece for the back of the top romper. I'm also going in to cut my collar piece, which I'll be needing 2 pieces for. And don't forget to cut your notches because these things would save your life. So I'm just going in here with the tiny scissors and cutting tiny snips along my notched points for my front, my backs, my collar pieces, as well as the bottom piece for this romper. Once all of the pieces are cut down, I'm just going to lay them nice and flat. The first piece here are my front pieces, which I've already fused some interfacing along the extension of the front because we're going to be folding it inwards like so and stitching it down to create the placket which the button and the buttonholes would sit on. So I've done this for the left and for the right hand side. I also have my back piece, which is just 1. I have my collar pieces, which is 2, and I've already fused them on the wrong side of the material. I've done the same with my collar stand, fusing on the wrong side of the material so the collar stand is nice and stiff. I also have my elastic channel, which is 84 centimeters long and 5 cm wide, and these we're going to be attaching along the waist of the bottom, through which we pass the elastic. I've also cut my bottom pieces, my front and my back, 2 for each, meaning 1 pair makes a right and the other pair makes the left. So now it's time to sew. I'm going to be starting out with the top of the romper. I have pinned together the shoulder seams and I'm going to be sewing them together on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using a normal straight stitch on my domestic machine. If you haven't seen the review of this machine, I'm going to be linking it somewhere on the screen. It's a great investment. So after doing that, I'm going to go on next and press my placket in like so. I folded it in once, pressed it down, and I'm folding it in a second time by 1 centimeter because the way we're going to do this is when you fold in that 1 cm, you just stitch along the edge of that folded part and automatically you have a nice stiff placket that sits on the center front of the top. So I repeated the same thing on the other side, and I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to be stitching it on the folded edge on the inside of the front. So starting with this side, I'm just sewing it down using a normal straight stitch on a seam allowance that is about 0.2 centimeters wide. Don't forget to go back in on the outside fold to do another stitch, which will just keep that folded edge nice and secure, and it just looks pretty cool when you have 2 stitches going along the placket. So next up here, I'm joining up my side seams with a normal straight stitch, and I'm going back in with a zigzag stitch to prevent my seam from unraveling since my domestic machine has gone on to the afterlife. So this is what the side seams look like. I did this for the left and for the right hand side before going ahead to work on my collar pieces. So this is my collar piece here. I'm just turning it the other way around so I can place right sides together and pin all the necessary points in place, because what we want to do is we want to sew from 1 point like so across the straight end down the side, keeping the bottom open because we want to be able to turn this inside out. So sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using a normal straight stitch, I'm just sewing together my 2 collar pieces, so when you turn this inside out, it's nice and clean along the edge of the collar when you've ironed everything and cut off any excess edges that it has. So I'm just going down the second side here all the way to the end and finishing off with a reverse stitch. So I've grabbed my small scissors and I'm going to shave off, you know, that pointed corner that the collar has. Because we want it to come out nice and sharp, I'm just cutting off the excess in that angle there, and I'm going to turn this inside out and use my scissors to help me poke this through so the corner is nice and sharp. Except you want to go for a rounded collar tip. I usually like to do this because it just helps the point to come out nice and straight. So I'm going to take this to my machine and give it a press before going ahead to attach my collar stand along the neckline of my collar. So what I'm doing here is I'm sandwiching the collar piece in between the two pieces of the collar stand. So I'm pinning this first one in place like so, and I'm going to grab the second one and layer it over like this, so that way when you stitch the collar stand from that end along this curved end around the neckline down the other end, you grab the collar piece in place. Sewing with a normal straight stitch on a 1 cm seam allowance, I'm just sewing around the neckline starting from point A all the way to point B. Just take your time because the stitch is quite thick here since we're sewing 4 layers in place. So I've just gone ahead and I'm grabbing my small scissors and I'm going to cut tiny snips, because when you turn this inside out, you want that seam to relax nice and easy around the neck of your shirt or your dress or the romper, as is in this case. So I'm just going in here to cut the tiny snips, shave off any excess from that curved end that the collar stand has. I'm doing it on the 2 sides, and then I'm going to turn this inside out to reveal the right side of the material like so. You will need to press this piece flat so it just relaxes nice and neatly before you go ahead to stitch it onto the neckline of your top. So this is what the top looks like right now. I've stitched down both side seams, I've done the plackets as well as the shoulder, but for the collar stand I pressed in the edges inwards by 1 cm. You don't have to do this, but I find doing this makes sewing on the collar stand onto the neckline a lot easier because you just follow that folded line. I'm pinning the first side of the collar stand along the wrong side of the material. You can see the right side, and I'm pinning it this way from the middle all the way to the left hand side and to the right hand side. So what you want to achieve is you want to be able to pin down one side first, sew down that side before you come back to use the other side to cover up the seam that you're about to create. So I'm just going in now to add 1 extra pin so that this collar stand doesn't move even when I sew on my machine, and I'm going to sew from one center front around the back neckline to the other side of the front of this thing. So I'm just going in and I'm sewing on a 1 cm seam allowance using a normal straight stitch. Just take your time when you're sewing because you're joining 2 curved sort of ends, and we all know that joining 2 curved ends is never really easy, so just be patient with yourself when you do this. So now I've gone in and I've turned the other side across the seam so it covers up the seam, and this is the right side of the top. So the seam that shows on the outside, or the stitch that shows on the outside, is on the wrong side of the shirt. So I'm just going in here and I'm stitching the other side of the collar stand across the stitch we made earlier on, and I'm stitching on a tiny edge stitch that is about 0.2 centimeters, just slowly easing and pushing across until I get to the other side of this collar stand, which would finish up joining the collar to the neckline of the top. So this is what it looks like right now. As you can see, mine didn't even come out perfect. You can see I pulled it a bit too much and there is like some weird gathering on the inside neck, and I wasn't really happy with that, but because it was on the inside it didn't bother me too much. So the next thing I'm going to use is some bias tape to finish the armhole, and I'm going to be using this black wide tape, and I'm going to pin it open like this and take this to my machine to sew. So we're going to be sewing along the first fold here, and I'm just sewing along the edge of the armhole, and this is about 0.5 to 1 centimeter wide. I stand corrected, but I'm just sewing this all around from the beginning all the way till I get to the end, but just leave a little bit so it overlaps the initial sort of bias point. Then you're going to turn this inwards so it covers up the seam, kind of like what we did for the collar stand. So when you sew this bias tape down folded in on the inside like this, you automatically finish off the arm curve or the armhole of the top. So I'm just going in here and I'm sewing on a seam allowance that was about 1.5 because the bias tape is a wide one. It's not the normal skinny one that I would normally work with, but it's a wider sort of width. So I'm just going in here and I'm sewing up until I get to the end, and this is what the armhole looks like. I gave it a quick press just to relax all of my seams, and like this, it already looks like a really cute button up crop top. So for those of you that want to make a shirt, a sleeveless shirt, you can stop at this point, fold in the bottom, fix your button and your buttonholes, and you're good to go. It's not perfect, but I am happy with it. And once you are done with the arm curve, the top part of the romper is relatively done. So we're going to move on to the bottom pieces, which is sort of like the high-waisted shorts that we're going to be attaching to the waist of the top. So I've pinned together the sides and inner leg seams for the left and the right hand side separately, and I'm going to be sewing this up on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using a normal straight stitch. And after that, go back in with a zigzag stitch just to secure that seam allowance and prevent it from unraveling when I begin to wear this romper with time. So I'm going in on my inner leg here, and because this inner leg has the angled points, you want to make sure that you turn like so when you get to sort of the tip of the points, because what this would help you do is when it's time to fold that bottom in, those angled points would make the folding of the shorts a lot easier. So this is what one leg looks like. I have done my zigzag stitch and I'm going in here to fold my first sort of turn up, and this first fold would be about 5 centimeters wide. So once you folded that in place, I'm just checking to see if it's like nice and rounded all the way around. I'm going to fold in the very edge by 1 centimeter. This would allow me to stitch that edge onto the shorts on the wrong side of the material. And even so, when you turn this up, you don't see any raw edge on the bottom of the shorts. So I'm just going to take this to my machine and sew an edge stitch that is about 0.2 centimeters using a normal straight stitch from the beginning all the way to the end, finishing off with a reverse stitch, and this will just automatically close off the hem and finish it off nicely for the bottom of the romper. You need to do this for the left and for the right hand side. So now that we've stitched that in place, we are going to turn this inside out to reveal the right side of the material. But I think I didn't do this correctly. If you guys have done turn up shorts before, please comment down below. So I decided to fold it up one time, but I found that when I started wearing the shorts, it was doing some kind of weird things on the inside. I think I was supposed to fold it again one more time. I'm not really sure, but I decided to fold it up like so, and then I'm going to be tacking down on the outside leg and the inside leg just about 1 centimeters wide. So you need to repeat this turn-up process for the other leg, so you have the two legs ready to be joined together along the crouch line. So I'm just going to pin them together, starting with the middle point, so I can pin together my fronts, pin together my backs, and I know I can join the two legs with one straight stitch from the beginning all the way to the end along the crouch line here. Using a normal straight stitch, I am sewing together my left and right legs on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using our basic stitch, and I'm going to go back in with a zigzag stitch just to secure the seam allowance in place and prevent this thing from unraveling. Since it's a woven fabric, Ankara is usually made with cotton, which is woven. So once that is done, the shorts is kind of ready to be fixed into the waist of the top, and that's why I like to sort of take care of the top first, take care of the bottom, and then we can join them together along the waist, so we have one piece that becomes the romper. So this is what the shorts looked like right now. I just gave it a quick press to relax all of my seams, and before we join it to the top, I'm going to join that channel strap that we cut earlier on. So I'm going to pin it along the center back like this, fold the bottom in by 1 centimeter, fold the front in by 1 centimeter, so we have a channel that the elastic can go right through. And the reason why I don't like the channel to start from the center front is because I don't want the gathering to be right in the front of the short. I want it to start slightly like 4 centimeters away from the center front of the romper. So I'm just going in here and I'm stitching in the folded edge, which is along the bottom of the channel from the beginning all the way to the end, leaving that sort of edge open for the elastic to go through. So I'm going to grab my top and we're going to be pinning the top together to the bottom. You can see the top is slightly bigger than the bottom by about 1 centimeter. I don't know what happened in the alternate universe, but we're going to pleat those into the bottom so we have a nice sort of rounded finish around the waist, and that would really show because of the elastic that we're going to be putting into the channel later on. So I'm just pinning my sides together, my center fronts together, my center backs together, adding some few extra pins, and I'm going to be stitching the top up to the bottom, and we're going to close off the top of that channel while we are stitching the top onto the bottom of the romper. So I'm just going in here sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using a regular straight stitch from the beginning all the way to the end. And when I'm done doing this first stitch, I'm going to go back in with my zigzag stitch, which is kind of like my assurance stitch, to ensure that the seam does not begin to unravel or it doesn't pop with wear and tear. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut my elastic band, and I'm cutting my elastic band that is about 80 centimeters long, which is my waist measurement. I found that that was a bit too large. I think I cut about 10 cm off, but that is better to have the elastic too long and then you can cut off any extra than the other way around. So now I'm just using a safety pin to pass the elastic through the channel, starting from this side, and not forgetting to pin down the other side, else you're going to lose your elastic when you're passing it through the channel of the waist. So I'm just going in here with my safety pin, passing it through, making any adjustments, moving the gathering to the other side as I stretch the elastic through the channel until it comes out at the other end of the channel. I suggest you try on the romper and see how the elastic sits on you, if it goes over your hips and your butt, how it sort of fits around your waist as well before you cut off any extra, because it's worse when you try it on and you find out that it was too tight and then there's really nothing you can do. So I've cut off my excess elastic and I've pinned it down in place on the left and on the right hand side. Just ignore the mistake I made on that left channel there. There was really nothing I could do to change that top folded stitch that happened, but I've taken this to my machine and I'm just sewing down the channel close using a normal straight stitch, doing 2 to 3 reverse stitches just to keep it nice and secure. This is what the romper looks like right now. I have joined the top together with the bottom. It's looking really nice, really good. I'm just going to go on and mark where I want my buttons and my buttonholes to sit. So for women's wear, you normally would have the right side on top of the left, so that means you want to put your buttonholes on the right side and your buttons on the left. For men's wear, I think is the other way around, but I stand corrected. So I spaced my individual buttons by about 7 centimeters, and the distance between my collar stand and my first button was 2.5. I didn't put a buttonhole or button on the collar stand because the button was just too large to sit there. So I'm just going in here to fix my buttonholes using my domestic machine. This thing is a real blessing to me and I'm so glad I invested in it. So I'm just doing that, finishing off that buttonhole before going ahead to cut it open using my tiny scissors like so. So you will need a small scissors to cut this open because the allowance to cut is really small, and you want a scissors that has a thin blade, thin enough to go in there to cut it open without messing up the stitch. So I went on ahead and I stitched on my buttons, or a total of 4 because they're large buttons, and I didn't put any button or buttonholes along the collar stand because it was too large to sit on there. So once that is done, the romper is complete. I actually really like the finished outcome, surprisingly really like it, and it's perfect for the heat wave that is going on in the UK right now. But I do have to mention that it was a bit of a struggle struggle to put on because the shorts is high-waisted. The top bodice is not long enough to, you know, comfortably wear it. You would struggle a bit if you make it using this method. So I would suggest you either bring the placket down to the center front or fix a zip so it gives you more room when it comes to wearing and pulling. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, give this video a thumbs up, comment down all of your questions, suggestions or ideas. If you've made a turn-up shorts or romper before, please say the right way to do it below so I can actually get it right myself. But with that being said, I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.